It's also the fact that everyone can now communicate with the social. People are following, and have these influencers. I mean, we have a big influencer community. So having influencers talk about your brand, and especially if you're in a certain specific category or arena, then you'll go for those influencers to talk about it, or yourself, and where you're able to really have that point of view and be out there. Where in the past you were kind of reliant on, is that the right customer coming through? Is your person behind the counter speaking to it?
What about like functional fragrances? I feel like that was a big category. I'm curious to know if that's still a big category, or do you find that people just want a scent that kind of represents their personality at the end of the day?
Our customers just wants a scent that they enjoy, and different personalities. They like so many different options, and to your point about blending together and mixing things and kind of creating their own scent. They enjoy that as well.
So what could, like, if someone, whoever, our listeners, if there's someone who's wanting to create a new fragrance brand, if you could create a new fragrance brand today that you think would like do well or take off, what would that look like?
Yeah, I think it has to be whatever that person's like passion is. Like if you, whether that's, say it's something that's on a more spiritual, or if it's more, someone's into sports, or whatever the angle that person has that has that edge, and say, well, how do I create a fragrance that can go well with this, or, or with, boating or golfing or whatever. Also, I think home scents, candles have been, I think, they were very hot and trendy during COVID. Now they've obviously slowed down quite a bit. So now it's, how do we do something more unique in the home? I think we also have we acquired a car freshener company called Drift, which has been really tremendous. That's been a bit of a white space, so that's been really successful. We see that.
Yes.
And then also, how do you do home differently? So I think if you just look at something and say, how do I do something that is a little different and make people's life easier? I think that's where you don't want to make it too complicated. I think that's when people can appreciate something new.
Yes. I like the idea of, like, for the boating culture, for the golfing, like something that's specifically some hobby or a way of life, living a lifestyle. Maybe it's like city culture. Like I had this one founder that was a graduate of one of our programs, and she created scents for professional women that wanted to sort of decompress after a full long day, especially women living in the city. And so like all the scents had this like fun sort of city names, and it was all about like decompressing and supporting your self-care, after, like, if you're a working woman doing a lot of things, running around, on the go. And it was a beautiful line that went into real estate locations as well. And it actually paired really nicely with like apartments, especially apartments in the city. So I definitely hear that. That's like, I wanted to put a pin in that for everyone who's listening. Really looking and being introspective is what I'm hearing, of what lights you up, what makes you passionate, what's your sort of areas of interest that you can niche that fragrance style to. And then you'll find your people.
Yes. You'll definitely find your audience.
Yes. And I think it's a little different than how it was before, because I don't think niching was as important years ago because there just weren't as many brands out there. Or would you say that's correct? Or
absolutely, it's grown, but it's also the fact that everyone can now communicate with the social. People are following, and have these influencers. I mean, we have a big influencer community. So having influencers talk about your brand, and especially if you're in a certain specific category or arena, then you'll go for those influencers to talk about it, or yourself, and where you're able to really have that point of view and be out there. Where in the past you were kind of reliant on, is that the right customer coming through? Is your person behind the counter speaking to it? There were so many variables.
That's right. So many variables. Now you can actually speak directly to the customer with all of the mediums.
Yes.
Speaking of mediums, Are you seeing certain brands that are popping off on your site that you know are just really resonating with customers? What are they doing in terms of marketing? What's really working right now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Parfums de Marly's it's been a minute for that, but they've been doing some in a beautiful product. But I think TikTok really helped them go into a different
Mm-hmm.
direction. That's why it's so funny when having the young boys talk about Parfums de Marly. They're like, I want the bottle with the horses on it. I'm like, that's $400.
Yeah.
Okay, like we can wait on that. Uh, but I think even thinking of Seven Virtues, which is a brand that's sold in
Yes.
Sephora.
Mm-hmm.
Barb, she's amazing. She has a great story. She also wants to help people, being more philanthropic. So I think when there's someone who has a passion like that, and you can
Mm-hmm.
really see, even I'm thinking of like Brown Girl Jane. I love what they've
Mm-hmm.
done, and their fragrances also have a bit of that, like, feel good, but then also for that community. So I think really just kind of standing out and being the best. Like, I would say the best in class. Like, how do I
Mm-hmm.
make my brand better? How do I make it
Love that.
better for the consumer? So I think
Yeah.
you're always constantly improving yourself. I think that makes a huge difference. I know I'll say what I really learned at Barney's is that we didn't really look at competition because we just were like,
Mm-hmm.
let's look at what do we want, because we knew we were like the trendsetters in a way. Like, but it was
Mm-hmm.
more so,
That's cool.
what do we think is cool? What are we looking for? That's the next thing, as opposed to saying, what is everyone else doing? Okay, how do I follow that? And that's I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that's ever a great strategy
No.
unless that's what your business is.
Right.
like
Of course. So what I'm hearing is pick a class or essentially pick a niche and then be the best in that space, in that category.
Yes.
And what do you think is next? What's coming up in fragrances? I know we talked about trends currently, but is there anything that you're seeing that you think or would like to see in the fragrance space?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we just came back from our leadership, where we were like, brainstorming on every way to be like the world of fragrance. So we have always lots of ideas. I will say, because obviously we're subscription does really well. So if a brand, also I'm going to say, if a brand can have a subscription, that also makes a difference.
Yes, great
And
point.
and discovery kits. I mean, we can't sell enough. I mean, people love discovery kits, and I think that's a great way for someone to really get the whole brand or most of the brand in one space, where they can then really learn about it. And I think you really have to invest in the box and make it really unique and special, and how that
Mm-hmm.
looks. I think Commodity does it really well. I think that they've done a great
Yes.
job on that.
Yes.
Um, and also, if you have something, let's say I'm saying not complicated, but something that's unique, you really want to be able to kind of speak it several times, because people don't
Mm-hmm.
always listen or pay attention.
Repetition.